The Kremlin is cracking. Behind closed doors in Moscow, whispers have turned into roars, generals plotting, alliances breaking, and Vladimir Putin's grip on power slipping faster than anyone imagined. For years, Putin ruled through fear. His inner circle was untouchable, his word, law. But now, everything is changing. Reports from inside the Russian capital speak of secret meetings, generals, intelligence officers, and political figures quietly aligning against him. They speak of betrayal. They speak of survival. Why? Because the war he promised would end in days has bled Russia dry. 1 million casualties, thousands of tanks gone, billions in military losses. The proud Russian army is now a hollowed-out machine, losing ground inch by inch. Families across the country mourn fathers, sons, and brothers, while the Kremlin hides the truth. Inside those marble walls, the very people who once swore loyalty to Putin now fear for their own futures. They know that when dictators lose wars, they don't forgive, they destroy. And many believe it's only a matter of time before Putin turns on them. But here's the chilling question. Are they planning to strike first? When Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine, he promised a swift and glorious victory. Russian soldiers were told to pack parade uniforms for their triumphant march into Kyiv. The world was meant to witness the unstoppable force of the Russian army. But the reality? A disaster. 4 years later, Russia is locked in a war of attrition it cannot win. The numbers tell the story. Over 1 million casualties, with 500,000 dead or permanently maimed.
Army has lost 4,000 tanks, 8,200 armored vehicles, and countless aircraft and artillery pieces. Each loss chips away at the myth of Russian military dominance. What has Russia gained for this sacrifice? Nothing of value. It controls less territory today than it did in 2022. Those bold promises of conquest have turned into bloody stalemates over ruined villages and scorched borderlands. And back home? Rage, mothers demanding answers, soldiers refusing to return to the front. Even loyal officers whispering about a war that's consuming their country for nothing. This collapse isn't just on the battlefield. It's eroding Putin's power from within. And that's why the next move could be the most dangerous yet, because desperate men do desperate things. The Russian military is bleeding from within. On the front lines, soldiers are exhausted, under-equipped, and increasingly unwilling to fight. Videos have surfaced of troops surrendering in groups, raising white flags rather than face certain death. Others have simply walked away, deserting their posts and vanishing into the countryside. Why? Because they've been fed into a meat grinder with no end in sight. Many were sent into battle with outdated rifles, minimal training, and no armor support, forced to assault fortified Ukrainian positions they had no chance of taking. Survivors speak of commanders who treat them as expendable, sacrificing lives for a few yards of bombed-out mud. And inside the officer corps, anger festers. High-ranking generals have seen their peers purged, demoted, or even jailed when things go wrong. They know they could be next. They also know this war is unwinnable. The result? A military that no longer trusts its own leadership, a force capable of turning on itself. And in Moscow, Putin's advisors see the danger too. They whisper about loyalty tests, secret surveillance, and plans to crush dissent before it grows. But what if those whispers aren't enough? What if rebellion is already taking shape in the shadows?
War doesn't just destroy lives, it drains nations. Russia's economy, once buoyed by oil and gas, is buckling under the strain of endless conflict. Defense spending has soared to record levels, swallowing nearly everything else. Roads crumble, hospitals lack medicine, and factories once producing consumer goods now churn out weapons for a war going nowhere. Ordinary Russians are feeling the pain. Prices for basic necessities, bread, milk, fuel, have more than doubled since the invasion began. The ruble staggers, inflation bites, and entire industries face crippling labor shortages as men are either at the front or buried beneath it. Even the elites are uneasy. Sanctions have frozen assets abroad and stripped away their lavish lifestyles. Luxury cars, foreign vacations, and offshore accounts have vanished. Some oligarchs have quietly fled. Others have mysteriously fallen from balconies or died in strange accidents, grim reminders of what happens when loyalty is questioned. This economic collapse is more than hardship. It's tinder for revolt. When people lose hope, they stop fearing their rulers. And when those who hold the money and power begin to see the regime as a liability, they start plotting for what comes next. The question is, who will strike first, the streets or the generals?
Leaked audio from within the armed forces reveals commanders cursing Moscow's leadership, calling them incompetent and corrupt. One colonel was reportedly heard saying, "We're fighting for nothing, only to keep one man in power." Statements like this were unthinkable a few years ago. Now they circulate across encrypted apps and Telegram channels daily. Inside the Kremlin, paranoia has taken hold. Putin has tightened his circle, surrounding himself with FSB loyalists. Intelligence officers monitor generals more than the enemy. Meetings, once full of confidence, are now silent affairs, with participants afraid to speak too boldly, fearing their words might be used against them. Yet suppression has limits. When frustration turns to desperation, silence breaks. History has shown it in every crumbling regime, the moment when those tasked with defending the leader become the ones who turn on him. And some insiders believe that moment is closer than anyone realizes, because the last time this happened, Moscow nearly fell. The last time Russia trembled like this was 2023. The name Yevgeny Prigozhin still haunts the Kremlin halls. He was once one of Putin's closest allies, a warlord who commanded the Wagner Group, Russia's most feared private army. But when the war turned sour and his men died by the thousands, Prigozhin broke ranks. On June 23, 2023, his fighters seized Rostov-on-Don and began their march toward Moscow. The world watched in shock as armored columns rolled unchallenged through Russian territory. Police didn't stop them. The army barely tried. And in Rostov, locals handed out food and wine to the mutineers.
Although the rebellion was abruptly halted and Prigozhin was later killed in a mysterious plane crash, the message was clear. Even Putin's fortress had cracks. 2 years later, those cracks have widened. The war is longer, bloodier, and far less popular. Generals know what Prigozhin dared to do and how close he came. Some see him as a fool. Others see him as proof that rebellion is possible. And now, whispers suggest a new plot may be forming, one far more organized, with far more at stake. If it ignites, it won't stop at Rostov this time. It will march straight for the Kremlin. Putin's answer to fear has always been the same: purge it. In recent months, a quiet storm has swept through Russia's command structure. Generals have been dismissed under vague health reasons. Others have been arrested on charges of corruption or treason. Some have simply vanished, never to be seen again. This is not discipline, it's desperation. By removing those he distrusts, he weakens the very army he depends on. Officers now lead with hesitation, afraid that a single mistake, or even a rumor, could cost them everything. Instead of focusing on Ukraine, many are focused on survival. Inside the Kremlin, the circle grows tighter. Meetings are smaller, decisions centralized, loyalty tested at every turn. The message is clear: fall in line or be destroyed. But purges come with a price. Every dismissal breeds resentment. Every arrest creates enemies, and every silent disappearance sends a signal to those still in power. No one is safe. This kind of fear doesn't suppress rebellion, it fuels it. Some of those who remain are already making contingency plans, aligning quietly with like-minded peers.
Because when leaders start eating their own, the end often isn't far behind, and Putin's enemies know they may not get a second chance to strike. At the center of this tightening noose stands the FSB, Russia's modern-day KGB and Putin's most trusted weapon. Its agents infiltrate every layer of the state, the military, the government, the media. They listen, they watch, and they strike when ordered. But there's a darker game at play. Some believe the FSB itself is fueling the very coup rumors shaking Moscow.
By planting whispers of betrayal, they identify potential dissenters, expose networks of disloyal officers, and eliminate them before they act. It's a trap disguised as rebellion. And yet, this strategy carries its own risk. When paranoia becomes policy, even the loyal start looking over their shoulders. A single false accusation can end a career or a life. In this environment, trust collapses. Officers fear each other as much as the enemy. The FSB might think it's protecting Putin, but it may be sowing the seeds of his downfall instead. Push people far enough, and even fear loses its grip. Some insiders warn that if the FSB ever miscalculates, if they target the wrong man or strike too soon, it could trigger the very uprising they're trying to prevent. And according to some sources, that miscalculation may already have happened. What happens if the unthinkable begins? Picture this. A midnight coup in Moscow, tanks rolling quietly through Red Square, communications blacked out, FSB offices stormed by men once considered loyal, the president's motorcade racing into the dark, destination unknown. This isn't fantasy, it's the scenario some in Russia's own ranks now whisper about. They know that if they wait too long, they risk being purged themselves, and if they act, they must act decisively, swift enough to leave Putin no chance to respond. Western intelligence has reportedly detected unusual movements near key military installations, fuel depots stockpiled, certain units quietly redeployed closer to the capital. Are these preparations for defense or for something far more dangerous?
If such a coup unfolds, the consequences would be global. Nuclear arsenals suddenly under uncertain control. A nation of 140 million plunged into chaos. And a war in Ukraine that could either end overnight or spiral into something far worse. The Kremlin insists everything is under control. But beneath that facade, one question looms. What if the man who built Russia's iron grip wakes up one day to find it shattered in his hands? Tonight, Moscow holds its breath. The streets may seem quiet, the government may project strength, but behind the walls of power, something is shifting. The whispers are louder, the alliances weaker, and the fear thicker than ever. Putin's greatest weapon has always been control. Control over information, over his generals, over the people themselves. But control is fragile. It shatters the moment those holding it realize they no longer believe. Some say it's already happening. High-ranking officers moving assets without orders. Business elites quietly moving their wealth abroad. Intelligence leaks hinting at plans that once revealed cannot be undone. And here lies the danger. When a regime begins to rot from within, its fall can be sudden, violent, and unstoppable. The question isn't whether Russia can withstand Ukraine or sanctions or even the West. The real question is whether it can withstand itself. Because if the next move comes from within the Kremlin, the world won't have time to react. And when that moment arrives, when the first shot of betrayal echoes through Moscow's night, everything, Putin's war, his rule, his legacy, could end in an instant. The only question left is how soon.